Hello everyone, greetings of the day, and in our today's lecture we are going to discuss about the models of communication. As you are aware of that in the previous lecture we have discussed about the process of communication, barriers in communication and the various strategies for the effective communication. So, today we are going to discuss about the various models of communication which are applicable as we are moving ahead when we are developing something in the area of communication. And so far we have discussed the concept of different types of communication. Now, let us examine some popular models of communication which help us in understanding the process of communication in a well mannered and structured way. So, models of communication have also been the subject of a vast amount of research. Yes, over a period of time many experts have developed the different kinds of models and the structures that how the communication has been done by the sender and the receiver, and in the meanwhile no single theory or model has found a general acceptance also. So, before discussing the models of communication, let us first understand what the term model means. Yes. So, a model is what? A model is a graphic representation designed to explain the way a variable works. Yes, we have a different variables by which we can decide, or we can say we are having a different elements of the communication. So, it may be a pattern, the plan, a representation or description designed to show the structure or workings of an object, system or concept. As you are aware of that, we are using the certain flow charts, right, where in which we are moving the step by step process. In the similar way, in the model of communication, we are moving with the step by step processes. So, a model of communication offers a convenient way to think about it by providing a graphical checklist of its various elements. Yes, as I have already told you that we have several elements and we are checking out the graphical representation and the checklist, and some of the important models discussed in this section highlight the complexities of the process of communication. As we are moving ahead, the communication process is becoming so complex, but with the advent of the information technology, the communication has developed many ways and it goes up to the many facets in our life also. So, the Greek philosopher Aristotle looked at communication from the rhetorical perspective, like speaking to the masses to influence them and thus persuade them. Yes, how we can speak to the masses and persuade them to follow us, that depends on our the speech, okay, the speaker and the audience. So, Aristotle constructed a model with three elements and these elements are the speaker, speech, audience. So, in this the basic purpose is to what? Is to persuade the other party as a receiver, we can say. So, speaking, speech, audience model is accepted by many as the first model of communication, and thereafter in the 20th century many more models came up. So, in the later part of the century, the concept of communication changed due to the advent of various mass communication media such as newspaper comes up, radio comes up and the television comes up. Nowadays we are having the internet facilities and the information communication technology. So, speaking, speech, audience model is the readily acceptable model by the many experts. If I am talking about the simple model which is defined by the Aristotle. So, during the First and Second World Wars, communication was also used for propaganda. Yes, there arising the propaganda and it was perceived as a magic bullet that transferred ideas and knowledge automatically from one mind to another mind. However, this was later found to be a very simplistic model which showed communication as a linear one-way flow of communication. Yes, as a linear one-way flow of communication means, right, the top authorities is flowing something to the masses, and that is acceptable in the masses, and that is acceptable in the audiences. That is what we are talking about, the one-way flow of communication. And during the First and Second World Wars, communication was having this certain propaganda which works as a magic bullet also. Now, let us discuss about the various models of communication, in which we have first, that is the Lasswell model, which was initiated and developed in the year 1948. And this is the model which is given by the Lasswell, and we are talking it the Lasswell model of communication also. It has certain elements which appears on your screen, that who says what, in which channel, to whom, and with what effect. So, here who is the what. So, taking one by one about all these elements, here it is the one of the early models of communication which was developed by the political scientist. Yes, I am using the word the political scientist, and the scientist is Harold D. Lasswell, who looked at communication in the form of a question, right, and the questions are who says what, in which channel, to whom, and with what effect. Yes. So, this verbal model focused attention on the essential elements of the communication and identified the areas of communication research. So, who here is the raises the question of identification of the source of the message, right, from which source, right, we are sending the certain message. Then through which channel is the subject of medium to be used. Yes, we are using the several channels by which we are sending certain message to the receivers, and they are saying what is the subject of analysis of that particular message. Yes, that is important. And to whom, that deals with the characteristics of the receivers and audience. Yes, definitely we are defining this message in such a way, right, by which we can deal with the characteristics of the receivers and the audience, because audience is having the different characteristics and the nature of accepting the certain message, and accordingly we have to provide the certain inputs in the message also. And what effect, that can be seen as a evaluation of the effect of the message. Yes, we have to evaluate in the form of the feedback, we can say, about this importance of that particular message under this Lasswell model, right, and it is an important model rather in the case of these models of communication. Then we have this second model in the process of communication, that is the Shannon and Wilbur model, that was developed in the year 1949. So, this is the the representation of the model of the Shannon and Wilbur model, that comprises of various elements, again the various variables we are having, that is the information source that appears on your screen. Then in between we have this message, we have to go through the message. Then we have the another element, that is the transmitter, that we need certain signals, right. Then we have the noise in between the signals. Then receiver, again with the help of the signal, receivers are receiving the message, and that message ultimately reaches to the destination. So, let us discuss this model in a comprehensive way. It is referred to as the transmission model of communication, as it involves signal transmission for communication. That is the one thing. Second thing, the information source produces a message to be communicated out of a set of possible messages, definitely, and the message may consist of spoken or written. So, in both the ways, the message consists of the spoken or the written word under this Shannon and Wilbur model. And the transmitter that converts the message into a signal that is suitable for the channel to be used. Yes, definitely. In this transmission, the message characteristics are being matched, and further the channel is the medium that transmits the signal from the transmitter and further to the receiver accordingly. So, the receiver performs the inverse operation of the transmitter by reconstructing the message from the signal. Yes, it is definitely the receiver also reconstructed that message and with the help of the signal, and ultimately we can say the destination where our message is to be received is the person or thing for whom which the message is intended. Yes. So, this model first time this model has introduced the concepts like the noise, disturbances or errors in transmission, problems in accepting the signal, message, etc. Okay. So, in this model, Shannon and Weaver model is the widely acceptable model also in the case of this transmission of the message from one place to another, from sender to the receiver. But there is a need for maintaining necessary balance between entropy and redundancy. Yes, these are the two concerns in this model. Entropy means the degree of uncertainty. Yes, when we are transmitting the message from one place to another, the degree of uncertainty to drop the certain message is more as far as the signal process is concerned, transmission of signal is concerned. That is the one thing. Second, we have the redundancy, that means the uniqueness of the information. So, in this way the uniqueness of the information may not be reached well to the receiver as far as the transmission of message from one place to another is concerned. So, redundancy and entropy is the two main concerns in this case of the Shannon and Weaver model. And this implied that for effective communication, the greater the noise in communication, the greater is the need for building redundancy. Yes, and the repetition of the message which reduces the relative entropy, or in other words the uncertainty about the message. That is the requirement and the prerequisite in this model. So, this model was criticized for being based on the hardware aspect that is basically developed for engineering problems and not for the human communication. Yes, this model is dependent on the these technological aspects, because there is a signal aspect we have a several channel which is based on the signal transmission. So, somehow this model is criticized on the basis of what? On the basis of the hardware processes and the technological barrier, okay, as compared to the human communication. Okay. Then we have a third model which was introduced by Charles Osgood's model, and that was in the year 1954. And that model is as appears on your screen. In this model we have this encoder, interpreter, decoder, then the message goes to the decoder, then further the decoder is to interpret, then encode, then further the message will move. So, this is a cycle that how the message is moving under this Charles Osgood's model. So, let us have a look on this the model. That model shows the communication is a dynamic process in which there is an interactive relationship between the source and the receiver of the message. Yes, there shall be the interactive this relationship between the receiver and the sender also. So, an individual engaged in the communication process ends as well as receives the message, and as such encodes, decodes and interprets message through a number of feedback mechanisms. Yes, we have a several number of feedback mechanisms by which we are encoding the message, we are decoding the message. Further, after decoding and interpreting the message, that message this again in the form of feedback has to be resent to the sender, and ultimately this process is going on in the case of this communication concerns under this model. Osgood, stressed the social nature of communication in this. In the earlier model, the social nature of communication was not there, but this model was found more applicable in interpersonal communication, in which the source and the receiver were physically present. For example, when a teacher teaches, the learners interact by raising certain queries, answering questions, etc. Right? That gives the the social nature of communication, because we are interacting with our teachers and we are raising certain questions and we are accepting certain answers from our teacher also. So the role of interpretation of this message has also been highlighted in this model for decoding a message. Yes, the role of interpreter is more important, as we know that the audience level is different if we are communicating to the masses. In the similar way, when we are communicating in the classrooms, the audience has a different levels of characteristics, okay, and accordingly we have to match the certain things according to the audience's acceptability. So that model help us to know about the the social nature of the communication. Then we have another popular model, that is the Wilbur Schramm model, that was developed in the year 1954, and that model is appearing on your screen. We have a certain field of common experience, and the field of common experience in this model is the signal. Yes, that appears the signal. Then we have a source, then we have an encoder, and the field of experience is also there. In the similar way, if we are moving towards the destination, that is the receiver perspective, we have again the field of experiences, then decoding of the message is there, then finally that message reaches to the destination. So let us have a look on this, how this Wilbur Schramm model is working. It is a well known communication expert and did not make a sharp distinction between technical and non-technical communication, but drawing upon the ideas of Shannon and Osgood's model. Yes, it is more or less reflecting the Shannon and Osgood models process of communication. So Schramm proceeded from a simple human communication model to a more complicated one. So his first model has a lot of similarity with the Shannon and Weaver model, and again it has represented the another model, the second model of this communication, that again it appears looks like this the Osgood models and the Shannon and Weaver model, that in the middle you can see that the signal is the common thing, right, and we have a field of experience, then the source and the encoder at the left hand side, then we have a field of experience, destination, decoder at our right hand side. So that means there is a role between the the source which can encode the message, and there is a signal in between, which is the field of the common experience for both the sender and the receiver. Then ultimately that message reaches to the destination, and after that that message has to be decoded by the receiver accordingly. Okay, that is the this Wilbur Schramm model of the communication. So in the second model above, Schramm visualized the process of communication as a process of sharing of experience. Yes, that is more important in this model, that both the parties are sharing the experiences which has a common experiences of those communicating. Yes, they have a common sharing of experiences and they are communicating with each other. So it introduced the concept of shared orientation between sender and the receiver, and the circles in this model, the circles in this model, that's it appears in the previous slides, that's that appears, that represent what? It indicated the accumulated experience of two individuals engaged in the communication. Yes, that is important. And the source can encode, as I have already told, the source is encoding the message and the destination can decode the message in terms of the experiences. So, that is the major characteristics of that model, that they are sharing the what? They are sharing the common experiences and encoding the message and decoding the message accordingly, right. This is another important model. And in this the accumulated experience of two individuals engaged in communication, and they are emphasizing, unlike in the linear models as discussed earlier, in which interaction, feedback and sharing of experiences find no place. Yes, in the earlier model the sharing of experiences was not there, but in this model the common thing is that the sharing of information, the sharing of experience is there. That is more important, because experiences tells us about the relevance and authenticity of the communication. So, the source can encode and the destination can decode in terms of what? In terms of experiences each of the party have, right. That is the major crux in this model. Ultimately, with the help of this model, communication becomes so easy as both the participants have a common field of experience. Yes, and if the circles do not meet there, right, as you have seen, there is a circle which is having the common aspect, that is the signal, then it is an absence of such common experience which makes the process of communication difficult. Yes, without the common experiences it is very difficult to understand the level of the communication process. Okay, that is very much important. Another important model in the field of communication is the Gerbner's model. Yes, that is again a very important model in the case of the events and the participants, as shown in this model appearing on your screen, that the Gerbner general model has the certain, here we can say the E, you can say in the circle E is the event, then M is the man or machine who is sending the messages, then E1 is the perceived message by the M, that is the man or machine, then S is the signal. Yes, S is representing the signal, S is given at the the bottom, where E2 is here in the representation of our diagram. Then content created by M, E2 is the content created by the M. So, let us understand in a comprehensive way about the relevance of this model. So, the Gerbner has made an attempt to produce the general purpose model of communication. Yes, it is the general purpose of model of communication, in which the communication is regarded as the way through which transformation or the transmission of the messages is facilitated, that how the transmission of the messages are being facilitated in this model, that is given very carefully. Okay, and that model assumes significance, that it is regarded as an advancement over the other models in two ways, and how it is the advancements of this model in two ways that we can be discussed. And the advancement over other models in two ways are as follows. In this model, the communication this is explained in the three stages. These are horizontal stage, the vertical stage, and the again further the horizontal stage. So, these are the three perspective. One is the horizontal stage, then second is the vertical stage, and further the horizontal stage. So, the first stage begins with E. E is the event, right, which is referred to as the external reality. Yes, we have to create certain event, and that event has to be communicated to the receivers. So, since human perception is regarded as the complex phenomena, and we are perceiving many things in a different way, and it is very difficult for the sender and the receiver to understand about the perception, that how the message can be received by the audience as we are spreading certain information in our organization, but there are certain peer groups who are taking that particular event in the form of message in a different way. Okay. So, this process involves interaction and negotiation. That is the this one thing in this model. Then in this way one makes an attempt to match the external stimuli. Yes, external stimuli is the motivation, that what kind of motivation a receiver has with the internal pattern of thought or concept and arrive at some perception of the event. Yes, it is not necessary that everyone is understanding at the same level of the event which is communicated to the masses or to the audience in the organization, right. These certain distractions are there, certain noises are there, and at the level of feedback, if we are talking about the feedback is important in this case. So, event has this great concern in the case of this first stage. Then second stage, that is the vertical dimension, which gives meaning to whatever has been perceived. Yes, and this is referred to as the message, which is singular. Yes, in a single way we can convey the message in this George Gerbner's model, which is having these events, which is having this M2 factor, and which is having the messages and how it can be perceived by the receivers. That is the important thing. And this model puts emphasis on the fact that channels are referred to as the primary aspects through which the processes of communications are facilitated. Then in the third stage, which has been already explained in the model, in the diagram, the processes are similar to the one which has been explained in the first case also. The meaning of the message is not contained in the message itself. Yes, that is important. Then in this stage as well, the concepts of interaction and negotiation are regarded as indispensable. Indispensable means that is necessary, right, when we are interacting and negotiating something as far as the event is concerned, externality is concerned. So, this model mainly focuses on the events, that the externalities of the messages which is conveyed through the processes in the way of the horizontal way and the vertical way, whereby the receiver is receiving that event and ultimately decoding that message and sending the feedback. Okay. This is about this George Gerbner's model. Then another model comes in the way in the year 1953, that is the Theodore M. Newcomb's model. And this Newcomb's model is like this, that appears on your screen, that we have a topic X on this this box above, and we have this B, that is the message receiver, we have this B C A, that is the message sender. So, this models, how these models work. So, Theodore M. Newcomb is one of the principal pioneers in the establishment of the social psychology. Yes, social psychology. That means Theodore M. Newcomb's emphasizing on the social interaction processes in the area of communication, and at the that is the comparison between the traditional disciplines of psychology and sociology as well. So, that is very much important in this case of this model, that combining with the sociology and the psychology, they are trying to understand about the sender psychology also, they are trying to understand about the sender or receiver sociology also. That is again is the unique feature of this model. Unlike any other models, it takes the shape of the triangle, as we have already seen in our previous slide, and the main significance of this model is that it makes an attempt to provide explanation regarding the role of communication in the society and in the social relationships. So, the major emphasis of this model is on the the social relationships. Then according to this model, communication processes renders a significant contribution in maintaining equilibrium within the social system. Yes, if we have a receiver A and this we have a receiver B, or we have a sender A or the sender B, right. That means in this model we have to make the certain balances between the communicator and the receiver, okay, and it is a major contribution, and this certain equilibrium equity has to be maintained under this model. So, in this model communication among the individuals is focused upon the social environment, that has been already we have explained. So, within the social environment there are number of aspects, in terms of which communication processes can be facilitated among individuals. Maybe there are certain language barriers, maybe there are certain regional barriers, okay. Then we are having the certain education level barriers in this case of this communication. So, these certain social balances are required to maintain in the process of communication under this model. And this model is again is a significant model in the light of what? In the light of individuals' increasing needs and requirements. As you know that over a period of time, individual needs and requirements are changing. As the education level of the people are increasing day by day, so the level of communication is also increasing day by day. So, this model is significant in the case of understanding the social strata and the social changes in the society, and how the social changes occurred in the society and how they are communicating with each other due to the increase in the level of education. So, that means a lot under this model. But in fact, when the individuals are residing in the democratic country, as we are residing in the democratic country, it is vital, it is important for them to generate awareness and augment their understanding in terms of factors of the social environment. Yes, of course, it is very much required when we are augmenting and understanding the terms of factors of the social environment. We have to make every individual understand about the relevance of changes in the society. Through this model, the individuals are able to understand how important it is for them to form effective communication terms within the social environment. Of course, when we are sitting in some conferences or in some meetings where we know that every people has the same kind of cadre, every people has the same kind of education level, and everyone has the same logical aspects in their minds. So, in this way we have to focus on the changes, and we require the more understanding of the communication level, okay. That is the important concern in this model. So, in order to enhance one living's conditions and meet all the needs and requirements, it is important that we have to establish the effective communication terms with each other, whether the formal communication in the society or the informal communication, which we are calling the grapevine communication, as we have discussed in our second, third lecture of this communication processes. And when the individuals will communicate with each other in a suitable manner within the social environment, then they will be able to work efficiently, right, towards the generation of desired outcomes and in sustaining what? One's living conditions in an appropriate manner. Yes, of course, communication gives us the idea to sustain ourselves, right, better in the society. And if we are not understanding the level of communication, that means we are not able to survive in the society. So, that model gives us the idea, gives us the perspective that how we can deal with these social changes. Accordingly, we are improving on our communication processes. Accordingly, we are working on our languages, etc. So, that model is quite useful. Then another model comes up in the year 1957 that we are calling the Bruce H. Westley and M.S. MacLean's model. Yes, and that models looks like this. We have the variables, we have the elements, we have the sender in the form of x1, x2, x3, x4 till xn, then they are conveying the messages in the form of x1, x2, x3, x3m, x4, then it again received by A, then A again converted into the x1 that received by C, right, in a zigzag manner. This communication is done in this model. And to understand about this model relevance and importance, it is an extension of this Newcomb's model, although it relates with the social interaction. Okay, the societal point of view is concerned. It has been specifically adapted for mass media. Yes, the mass media means we have a ample number of mass media nowadays, but to which media we can rely on, it's very difficult task. We are receiving the communication from various sources, various channels. For example, we have a G News, we have a Aaj Tak, we have a BBC News, etc. We have a radio Mirchi, we have a radio FM, but which source we can rely on, right? So that model represents what? That model represents the communication in the form of what? In the form of mass media. And it is based on the assumption that the messages in the mass communication passes through different points. Yes, we never know the points that appears in the the model. We never knows the points where the the message comes on, right? But it's very difficult to understand that where the message comes from. Okay, so which are known as for example, in an organization, if wants to convey the message to the vice president of the company, but who is your first encounter? Your first encounter is the gatekeeper. Yes, of course, without the permission of the gatekeeper, you are not thinking of to meet the vice president of a company. So it is the gatekeeper. Then further, gatekeeper has to phone to the immediate boss, then immediate boss to the another boss. In the similar way, the message which reaches to the ultimate audience, that message may have a chances of distraction also. So in other words, in this model, there is a mediator, right? There is the importance of mediator who render a significant contribution in facilitating communication between the senders and the receivers. Okay, we can also it's the channel. So the gatekeeper concept is essentially referred to as a concept which is mostly used in what? Mass media, and mostly associated with the news on frequent basis. Okay, and this model focuses upon the aspect that the role of gatekeepers are regarded as crucial in facilitating the communication processes. Yes, that means the gatekeeper has a more important role in this specific model of the communication. But the primary job duties of the gatekeepers are they have to require to make decisions in terms of what messages are to be transmitted and how the content has to get modified. Yes, that's important. So the source of information, sender, gatekeeper, audience and feedback are regarded as important features of this model, and the medium is important rather in this model. But there is a limitation of this model, and this model limitation is it applies only to mass media and does not take into account the relationship between the mass media and the other systems. So that is the major concern. These includes family, work, friendships, educational institutions, organizations, religious places, public places, and all the other formal and informal networks through which terms and relationships are established among individuals. Okay, so normally what happens? Communication processes are facilitated among the individuals through these various forms with their families, educational institutions, organizations, communities, and the various public places, right. As a result, the models of communication are considered important concepts that helps the individuals in acquiring what? An efficient understanding of the processes of communication, that in how many ways in the process of communication is done. Okay. So, like the nature and concept of communication, the models of communication are also regarded as crucial. I am using the word that the models of communication are also regarded as crucial with the changing facets in the society, in the life, and the technological enhancements and advancements are there in the environment. Okay. So, there has been extensive research conducted on the development of the models of communication, and the models of communications are Lasswell model, Shannon model, Osgood model, George Gerbner's model, Theodore M. Newcomb model, Bruce H. Westley model, and M.S. MacLean model. So, through acquiring an efficient understanding of these models, the individuals are able to identify how the flow of information takes place between the senders and the receivers. The purpose of understanding the models of communication is that what is the relationship between the communicating processes between the senders and the receivers. Though in some cases there are limitations as well, but the individuals need to ensure that limitations do not prove to be barriers within the course of effective communication. We have to improve on and we have to overcome that limitations with the facets of improvement in the communication processes. So, finally, it can be stated that models of communication are facilitating the communication processes in a well organized manner, right. Models of communications gives us the facilitating us the communication processes in a well organized manner as compared to the informal way of this communication processes. You can do the self assessment by discussing the importance of communication models for an organization. You can also discuss the Shannon-Ware model of communication and some other models. Here are the references. You can follow these references for that topic, and thank you so much for being with me. We will be discussing more on the communication in our later lectures.